Welcome to Moab, Utah. If you're watching this on replay, as far as I know, there's no one here, which I think is a first. It might actually be a good thing because the connection seems to be, the Wi-Fi seems to be not as strong as it needs to be. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. So I'm gonna go through some photos I took a couple of hours ago in the Arches National Park and just share with you some thoughts on perspective and balancing a picture and how to draw the eye, in terms of what you're seeing. So let's do that. Actually, let's do it like that. This is my second visit to Arches. I'll probably be making one more, but the trick was catching the that golden light of the sunset, which is something that my grandfather often painted. So the brown, brown or sort of, I guess it is brown. The brown of the rock of the cliff face in the light of that golden light at the end of the day gives the appearance that it's glowing. Foreground, you know, in sort of shadow. It actually looks like the rocks are glowing, and that's kind of the effect that you're trying to get. So I'll put a couple of pictures aside. You can see quite clearly in this image how just the contrast between the rocks on the one side and the rocks on the other side, right? So obviously you can see these rocks here, but it's got in shadow compared to that, where the contrast between the rock that's in light and the rock that is in shadow is quite a stark contrast. But can you see how golden that is compared to that? Well, that's the kind of effect that you're going for. And so, how does one convey the spectacular, right? And this is as an artist, as a photographer, as a visual person. And you, to some extent, want to contrast the background with something in the foreground, something that is very low down with something that is very high up and towering. And of course, it does help if you've got the sky that is also playing a part in this. And in this particular image, one can only wonder what these clouds would have looked like in the, with even later in the day, when it sort of turns pink and purple. Um, Today promised to be a spectacular sunset, but there was a lot of cloud blocking the area where the sun was going down, and I think that sort of led to a kind of a strange sunset that wasn't particularly spectacular for photography. It was quite nice to see it anyway. This is just a view from our window. I've really struggled to capture these beautiful mountains. Can you see how that actually looks like a painting itself? It's zoomed in, but you kind of have three layers here. You have the layer of distant mountains that are almost turning blue. I think I'm going to just uh, take myself out of that so you can see. So you have the sky layer, which is about a third. Then you've got this layer, which is sort of a gray blue. And I've found this really incredible is how warm it is in Moab, and yet you've got these snow-capped mountains in the distance. Anyway, then you've got this rock in the foreground, which is sort of a brown beige sort of sorry, not the foreground, the middle ground, a sort of bare contrast, and then you're contrasting it with a third layer, which is the scrub. Now, I'm certainly not trying to say this is a fantastic picture. I'm simply saying how I've struggled to show, to capture. So when the hi Zircon, good to see you here. So when you see the little circle on your screen, it's because the connection here is weaker than it really needs to be. So I'm not sure if this will end up being a full episode. But anyway, so what is kind of missing in this image is some of that sunshine, perhaps on the foreground here. Or maybe you need to get to a spot where these mountains are closer. Easier said than done. How close you get to them before you start running out of this sort of terrain, right? But all over, when you're driving through Moab, you see these towering pyramid-shaped mountains with snow on them, and it's that sort of white and gray is a beautiful contrast to the biscuit brown, that frames so many images. And so that was the view simply through my car window, and because I couldn't really capture the sort of view that I wanted, this gives it a little bit of a nice touch. It makes it a little bit more accessible. Hey, that's the view outside my window. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. So this is actually frustratingly difficult to so by the way, there are those snowy mountains in the distance. You can see once again, although they're there, and although it's incredibly, Karen Sanderson, good to see you. Although they're there, and although it's pretty spectacular. By the way, that actually looks like a painting as well. Look at this. This kind of looks a bit like Van Gogh. Even that does. But because it's relatively far away, you don't really get a true sense of the scale that you're dealing with here. And what is really weird, and in fact, unfortunately, I didn't put this in the file. Maybe I'll put it up on Patreon or something. But they actually say how deceptively large this rock is. And as you walk around it, you see that the rock is almost shaped like a cell phone on its side. From the one angle, it looks like it's teetering, but on another angle, it's a much bigger rock than you think. And so, how do you try to capture the scale of this image? By the way, when you stand next to this rock over here, it's a towering rock, and it's also quite difficult just to show the immensity of this rock. So one of the things I wanted to do was basically take a photo with the top cut off, right? And it basically looks something like that, where you see this going vertically from the ground up, and you don't know how high it goes, and then that is contrasting with this, um, the flat. And to be honest, it didn't really work. That was the idea. It didn't really work. How do you frame it? How much of this do you put in? It's quite an interesting test of your photographic moment to catch up. What's quite nice with this angle is you can clearly see um, how it is teetering. It's a big rock that is barely hanging on to the edge there. This section underneath it is obviously weathered away. Again, what's not ideal here was, although the sun hadn't set, you don't actually have this in sunlight, and so that's also not ideal. But you'll see in, just go back a second. So you'll see in, and you'll see what a difference that makes as well. So I'm now going to play some video. I'm not sure how effective it's going to be because I was walking, but you're going to see how the size of that rock changes as you move around it, and that's what you want to do as a photographer, as an artist. Move around the thing that you're painting and find the best angle and the best perspective. Don't just look at it and approach it. Move around it, move closer, move further away, move left, move right, move closer to the ground. You know, try all sorts of different angles and see what works. Think about the framing of grass and trees and the lie of the land. So this is just walking around that that teetering rock. Good to see you, Bridget. Lorraine, good to see you as well. So this was just video taken while I was walking past the rock. Now you're going to notice how that rock starts to look different. It seems to be teetering more over the edge. The part under it, the base seems to be getting smaller and smaller. The rock seems to be getting wider. You start to realize it's actually got a strange shape. It almost looks like it's got a face on the left-hand side of the rock. And now that's not such a great angle. And then you look in front of you and you see that again, that beautiful view of the I'm not quite sure what I was saying there, but the beautiful view of again of these mountains. And so I was going to come back to that rock that is teetering and try and capture a sense of just how strange this landscape is, where you've got these towers that go almost straight up, and then flatness, and then another tower and another tower, and then show these huge mountains tiny in the distance. And is it going to be possible to do that? So I'm going to show you again uh, this little bit of video of how the shape changes as you pass it. Alina, good to see you here as well. For those just joining, I'm in Moab at the moment. I'll be in Moab again tomorrow. I'm actually going rafting tomorrow morning. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to wake up in time. It does get quite cool overnight, so they it's sort of moving out of the good perspective. That's not really a great perspective. You can't really see much behind it. Okay. Right, so there was my attempt to take that image that I mentioned. Does it succeed? Would you say that's a successful image? Maybe black and white would work better than that. Maybe there's too much over here that's sort of nothing. And so maybe if we do this, let's get rid of me. If we do this, then it's a better image. What do you guys think? Chelsea, good to see you as well. Well, we're already 15 people, half as many as we usually are, so not bad. And you can see in this image, you've got enough cloud to keep this big block of blue sort of busy. You've got some nice pink and different colors starting to touch the fluff over here. And this is really nice to see is this sort of kind of hazy cloud. It, just adds a little bit of atmosphere and a bit of texture to the sky. But the part that I really like the most is right here. I mean, just look at that. It's just got a quality to it that is, if you didn't see it, if someone did paint this, you might not believe it. And so this is the kind of thing I really love, is taking a photo that looks like art. And doesn't that look like art to you? Okay, let's go on to the next one. So this is simply just trying to capture the enormity of this pillar. And you can see this is where it's actually in the sun. And you can see how this is kind of an unsuccessful photo. Part of the wideness of the lens is causing this pillar to distort, to sort of tilt over like this. But it's actually incredible standing right next to it, because it's an incredibly tall structure just shooting right out of the ground. So let me go back a couple of images just to remind you of. So I want to go before this, before that as well. There you kind of get a sense that it just goes straight up out of the ground. And it's the size of a, not a skyscraper, but a pretty tall building. Can't really see it there. Can't really see it there. And so how do you show this size? And so as I mentioned earlier, you try to profile it next to what should be a giant landscape, and you are showing the size of of this thing, and it's supposed to be kind of disturbing. And so, questions: how much do you show of it? And so, anyway, you can see that when you right next to it, it doesn't work. When you this angle obviously doesn't work. And so, what I want to show you now, we're going to get to Van Gogh letters in a moment, is how what are other ways of showing off this rock that it's sitting on top of the other one. Do you want to show the whole thing in sort of a balanced portrait, which is what this is? And obviously, in a balanced portrait, you're not really able to appreciate the size of this, right? It's sandstone, and so the artistry in this image is that it's nicely proportioned and it's balanced, but you're losing the actual scale. You really are drawing attention to this dead tree when this is actually definitely more impressive. So how do you use this but keep the emphasis on that? And so that's one way of doing it. You try and step back a little, which makes this smaller relative to the scene that's around you. At the same time, what you're doing is you are bringing the sky back into the image, the perspective of the sky, and there the sky's doing its thing. And what's also nice with this is you can see in the distance, you're getting a little bit of a better sense of just how impressive this tower is, which you don't get in the previous image. And so you can step further back and try different angles. And then I think I took some video just to show you how just moving around a little gives you a different sense of what you're seeing. So this is some footage I shot a couple of hours ago. Can you see how showing the movement also creates a changing sense of perspective? Look at that also as a beautiful image, taking your attention actually away from these objects right in front of you, the tree and the tower of rock. It's taking you nowhere in particular. It's just taking you. It's basically saying, um, look at this vast landscape. Look at the contrast in it. You guys want to watch that again? What's really amazing about this area around Moab is it's almost like like an artist's paradise because there are beautiful rock structures, there are beautiful trees that are sort of gnarled and in different shapes. There are beautiful patterns just in the paths and the rocks and the sky, and it's just really asking you, well, where do you want to stand? Where do you want to put yourself in order to capture this? And so, just before I show you this, so I purposefully did this video the way that I did it. What you're kind of going to get a sense of is, okay, I see that, and then it just goes on and on. You realize, jeepers, this is an enormous landscape, right? So this is just yet another way of saying, well, let's look at the landscape this way. And so this is 1 minute long, but the whole idea is to capture the full horizon, one side to another. And unfortunately, again, there was cloud. You'll see when the camera's facing that way. The cloud unfortunately blocked some of the sun, so the typical sunset and the lighting up of the clouds didn't quite happen. Anyway, nevertheless, it's quite impressive. So let's have a look. Okay, I'm gonna have to start again because it didn't quite capture that. Let's try again. Unfortunately, the streaming is kind of getting stuck every few seconds. And so can you see that camper van that's moving up? I'm purposefully tracking it to show you to move along with it as it approaches these arches. And that also gives you a bit of a sense of scale. It allows you to access the landscape. There you go. And that gives you also a sense of scale. I keep following that camper van. Anyway, I did another video of that as well. So I think that is kind of just about it. Okay. So I thought you guys might find that quite interesting, just going into a particular setting and trying to convey it in a way that is doing justice to it. I mean, there's no question that it's an impressive landscape. There's no question that it is, monumental and you know, the sort of inspiring thing that any artist or photographer wants to capture. The question is, how do you capture it? And, you know, in terms of my travels to America, I've been very conscious of, if Van Gogh could see this, would he have ever left? Like if he'd seen the redwoods, would he have ever left Northern California? If he'd seen these sort of monuments. But I do think the more you travel, the more you realize this is so incredible, but you have to move on, otherwise you're going to miss the next incredible thing. So you probably would have realized that as well. But definitely, you could imagine someone spending a lifetime, in this area. If not a lifetime, then decades of a lifetime. So, oh, you noticed the moonflower hat? Yeah, I had lunch there again today. Yeah, I mean, if you think about where he went in order to find subject matter, he went to the south of France, and there are rock formations there, and there are, there's different lives to the land and all that kind of thing. Um, I think this landscape would have blown his socks off, you know. So that's quite an interesting point, and you know, I think um, I think when I look at my own photography and I look at some of the paintings of my great grandfather, you'll see that for the most part there are no people in the photos, because what the photo is kind of the impression the photo or the painting is giving you, and let's face it, Van Gogh does the same thing. It's normally empty of people, and that's not necessarily an accurate representation. It's not necessarily like when I was there were people around me, not lots of people, but there were some people around me. So why are you photographing it, going to the trouble to not show people there? And I think it's for a couple of reasons. The one is you want to concentrate on nature. But the other thing is it's kind of giving an impression, which is actually a false impression. It's giving um, it's suggesting that this is a landscape that is available to you, a landscape that you can go to, that you can not possess, but you can enter. And of course, that's not entirely true either, because I mean, the only way I could get into Arches yesterday and today was by coming in after, is it 4 p.m., basically when the park's closed, because otherwise you've actually got to book, because there are queues and queues of people. So this idea that it's this beautiful empty landscape and it's just waiting for you isn't totally accurate, right? Um, and there's something sort of incongruous about a landscape like that, and then showing people. And I showed some of the photographers there. I actually took one photo when I was sort of looking back, and you just see this big bare rock with people dotted on it. And when I took the photo, I thought to myself, this is the human situation. And then you might say, well, what did you mean by that? Well, it's whatever you think. What is the human situation? So let's have a look at some more of your comments. Yeah, I mean, so the untold story of the delicate arch is, which is a lot like going to look at Starry Night in the museum, is, well, you're not the only person that's there to take a picture of it. And so there's actually kind of a queue, and what makes it not fun is it's like, okay, now it's your turn, and you don't have unlimited time. You don't have time to muck about. You need to do your thing and then get out the way because the next person wants to do their thing, right? And I mean, one thing that I wanted to do was, and I did do this, I record video entering the arch and then sort of panning around. And although the idea was good, what I didn't do is I didn't turn the video up to show the arch and then look the other way. Instead, I turned the video like that. And so you just see one of the arms of the arch coming down. And so essentially I needed to go back there and, capture that arch doing that. There's another guy who asked me to take a recording of him and he wanted me to do it on slow-mo, but like my phone doesn't have that and he didn't really explain to me how his worked. So anyway, the point is everyone is trying to get a picture of themselves with the arch, not themselves and someone else, not themselves and other tourists. This is the arch and me. This is that incredible formation and me. And it's kind of a way of saying I was there. And that's not as impressive as I was there and so were hundreds of other people. You know what I'm saying? And so, when you see Gabby Petito and Brian, they are just like I am, just one of lots and lots and lots of people taking photos. The the thing that you get as the viewer is a sense of if you were there, and it's sort of you're trying to make it a little bit more special to say this is what's waiting for you. Yeah, and thousands of other people as well. Okay, so Chelsea says I only wanted pictures of Story Night. I didn't care to be in the picture. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not really a selfie guy, and I sort of feel weird actually taking selfies, but I sort of also feel like, um, when I'm back in South Africa, it'll be good to have a couple of photos that do show me with a particular background. Otherwise, you could say that's anyone's photo. Um, but I've been very conscious of Van Gogh while I've been traveling. I mean, today I went down into that canyon. When you see those photos of the two sides, I went down into that canyon. My left knee hurt a little, so I was thinking I'm not going to walk that far. And there were all sorts of people gathered in little groups, giggling and doing their thing and taking group photos. And when I returned, one girl sort of like you could see that she pertinently looked at me, and I don't know what the look meant. I don't know if it was, I don't know if I looked miserable. I don't know if she wondered why did I come back after I'd gone down there. Um, but I'm very conscious of I'm one of the few people that's traveling by myself. Mostly it's people in groups of two, three, four, five. And it is actually very rare that you see someone by themselves. I do see them now and then, but you don't see it very often. Uh, and I've got to say, when I go somewhere and I'm by myself, I'm actually fine. It's when you bump into someone else, that you feel this weird mirror thing going on. You feel that you have an impression of them, but also they've got an impression of you. And sometimes there's nothing strange about it, and sometimes there is something strange about it. I actually had a good chat with an Asian dude and I didn't actually ask their names, coming down from the Delicate Arch, and it was like I would constantly be in front of them, and then somewhere along the line they'd pass me. I would probably be taking photos, and then I actually made a joke to them afterwards. I said, "How do you guys manage to constantly be one step ahead of me? Because what's going on?" And then after that, I went and took some photos of petroglyphs, and again they were in front of me again. So, but I don't mind like going into these landscapes by myself. It's a little less pleasant when people are giving you sort of weird looks, like, "What's his story?" So it's actually weird how you, in a way, prefer. It's not like I'm alone and I'd like to be with someone. It's almost like you prefer not to see too many other people wondering what's going on with you, you know. And I suppose I could say, well, my girlfriend was on Farmer Seeks a Wife. That's my story. Zirgan said, I don't mind the solo experience. So what is nice about traveling by yourself is you decide absolutely everything that you want to do, when to eat, when to stop, what you want to take a photo of. Um, oh, you can be completely impulsive. You can stick to a schedule or change it. You can do exactly what you want to do. And I mean, even I actually saw people with their dogs. They actually signs they're saying no pets, but even without a dog, you can kind of do things that suit you in a way. So there is something to be said for it. Okay, should we deal with? We had 36 minutes. Should we sort of spend a little bit of time on Van Gogh letters? Heidi, good to see you here. Okay, yeah, it is easier alone, but I certainly wouldn't mind some company here and there. That's for sure. Okay, so let's put this full screen. 14th of August, 1888. Letter from all. My dear Theo, I spent yesterday evening with the second lieutenant. He expects to leave you on Friday. Then he will stop a night at Claremont. And from Claremont, he will send you a wire to tell you by what train he will arrive Sunday morning. The roll he is bringing contains 35 studies, among which there are many I'm desperately dissatisfied with, but which I'm sending anyway, since at all events they will give you a vague idea, right? They will give you a vague idea of the very fine subjects there are in this country. So bear in mind, almost like the situation I'm in a different country. I'm seeing interesting places. I'm sort of, I sort of brush shoulders with every now and then, not shoulders, but I sort of come into contact with people every now and then. And it's sometimes quite amusing. I mean, when I signed up for white water rafting, at a certain point, I had to sign a disclaimer, and a young kid who was putting my information in obviously couldn't make out a word of what I was saying. So, like, he totally misspelled my name when he put in the country that I was from. To be honest, I couldn't even tell what the country was. It's one of anyway. And so I realized, jeepers, this kid cannot make head or tail of what I'm saying. And like, I kind of want to say, it is English. Don't panic. It is English. Um, but so exactly what I've taken you guys to those photos is similar to what Van Gogh is doing, but he's doing it all on foot. So I got into an air-conditioned car. I ate a nice meal, another nice lunch at the co-op. I could afford to eat a reasonably good meal. I could afford to drive there, right? And then take photos with my phone and then come back and have a bath and have something to eat, right? Whereas Van Gogh is he walks out there every day in the hot sun. He doesn't have air conditioning. He's trying to make the most of like I'm basically in Mo 4 or 5 days, and I feel like that's quite a lot. Whereas he's in all for basically ends up being about a year, 6 months to a year. But exactly what I did today, Van Gogh is doing every day for weeks and months. And it's kind of not having this experience that we having, meaning I took some pictures. You guys or wherever you are in America and the rest of the world, 21 people saying, well, that's actually quite stunning, well done. Well, Van Gogh has an audience of maybe three, his brother. And I mean, like all those images I took a couple of hours ago, right? and you guys are able to give me feedback pretty quickly, whereas he's getting like no feedback. Maybe his brother sends him a letter and says, I quite like the blue in that painting or whatever. But can you see how far more torturous his experience is? He's also going out alone. It's one thing, like if I go out alone, I've got the music on. Some of the songs are really enjoyable. I turn the volume up. I'm kind of enjoying myself. I can see, I can look at the navigator. Maybe I should go this way or that way. Um, and everything's quite quick and easy. Whereas he trudges along, he's hot, he's sticky, he's tired. I've got some cool water, that's still been refrigerated. I've got like a sandwich with me, whereas his options are far fewer, and he sort of repeats that day after day, and it's a much tougher thing that he's doing. And so he's got incredible resilience that he keeps going out every day despite basically getting no feedback. So, like, good feedback would be if somebody bought his painting. Good feedback would be if more and more people started talking about what he was doing. But he's also a little like me, just different. I mean, he's a Dutchman in France, and there is a perception that hey, you're a foreigner. What are you doing here? Who are you? What is actually going on? What are you actually? What's actually kind of going on here? Like, what's your story? And but no one really asks him that, right? I mean, this morning I had a long conversation with the receptionist. I really just wanted to know, when am I checking out that day or that day? And we ended up having like a long chat. And she was like, wow, that is so cool. That's your story. That's so cool, whatever. No one's really asking him what his story is. And so he's quite a lonely figure trying to do a very hard thing, right? Sharon, good to see you. Sharon says you guys would have enjoyed each other's company. I wonder. I think I would have said to Van Gogh, that's terrible. And I think he would have said, F you, stick to your photography or whatever. Um, Bridget says, is the co-op food worth the expense? I like it because it's healthy. It is quite expensive, but I like it because it's healthy. Um, and it's warm. It's sort of cooked food. And, I don't always want to go into a restaurant. Yeah, so that's really the reason. I must say that today there were some fascinating characters there. The people that are there are definitely interesting folk. And Gabby and Brian, you can see why. Like, I would love to have a co-op like that, be able to visit a co-op like that um, forever. I mean, it's such a cool shop. Okay, so Heidi, MJ, good to see you here. Yeah, no luxuries, no luxuries. I mean, I used to be a freelancer like that. I used to live a much harder life than I'm living now. You know, but anyway, I would have been brutally honest. Okay, so let's continue with the letter. So I'm just trying to say that I'm trying to show you how, in a little way, what I'm doing is what Vincent van Gogh was doing. Not to say I'm Vincent van Gogh, but to show you that what Van Gogh was doing wasn't so strange. He was going out every day trying to capture the landscape, but it was a lot harder for him to do, and he was getting very little feedback. Letters from his brother every now and then. And so he's going to talk about that in this letter. I think it's this letter, some of those hardships. It says, for instance, there's a rough sketch I made of myself laden with boxes, props, and canvas on the sunny road to Tarason. So this is actually kind of a self-portrait, and I have to say, I think quite a terrible self-portrait. So there's that's a picture essentially of himself. It looks like he's wearing a blue suit. I'm not sure if that's a walking stick or if that's part of his easel. You can see he's got quite a heavy thing going on. But if you ask me, it's a terrible picture. The background's not too bad. The background's not too bad. But I mean, what's going on with this? What's going on with this face? And that's where I lose a bit of respect for Van Gogh, because maybe he could have put a bit more effort into that. I mean, the central thing you want to look at here is, I guess, the person's face, and look what a I don't know. I don't doesn't really work for me. Okay, so let's get back to this letter. It says there's a view of the road in which the sky and the water are the color of absinthe, with a blue bridge, and figures of little black urchins. There's the sewer and a washing place, and others as well. I think it's talking about this being the color of absinthe. Okay, I've actually seen that one before. It says, what has happened to the Souvenir de Mauve? Not having heard any word of it, I've been inclined to think that Tierstig must have said something disagreeable to you about it, to the effect that it would be refused, or some such unpleasantness. Needless to say, I shan't fret over it if this is so. Just now, I'm working on a study like this. I think he's referring to men loading boats, and this is actually quite a nice picture. And then he says, have you received the three drawings of the garden? And then he says, I'm afraid I shall not get a rather beautiful model. So this is where he talks a little bit about his feeling of disappointment. He looks like he had his heart set on painting a beautiful girl or beautiful woman. Then she promised, but then, as it appears, picked up some change by going on a long weekend, and now has something better to do. Now, I kind of get the idea that the model is actually a prostitute, and that she got kind of a better offer, or she got a different offer to go with someone on the weekend, and so she took that offer instead. He describes her as extraordinary, the expression like that one by Delacroix, the figurative, primitive, and strange. And so in a way, you get the idea that this is the way that he's, to some extent, I think, dealing with not just his loneliness, but with sort of his overall situation. And obviously, it's in this particular instance not really working out. Here's another. I'm not sure if this is the same thing. Is it a sketch? Yeah, it's a sketch. But look at the detail there. It shows you he is capable of detail. So again, that self-portrait where he doesn't do much with in terms of his face. He can do detail if he wants to. Look at that. Okay, so he says they've been talking about this woman who was extraordinary, and she was beautiful, but somebody else apparently snapped her up. Then he says, I endure these things with patience, failing any other way of bearing them. But this continual difficulty with models is maddening. And so there you have a kind of a rare instance where Van Gogh actually admits to feeling maddened. Not mad, but maddened. What's maddening him? Well, he's trying to get hold of a woman and she slips through his fingers. And maybe it's not the first time that's happened. And obviously, he probably doesn't have a lot of money that he can offer. Anyway, he says, one of these days I hope to make a study of oleanders. If I painted prettily like Bouguereau, people would not be ashamed to let themselves be painted. But I think that I've lost models because they thought that they were badly done, because it was only pictures full of painting that I did. So you kind of get the idea that when he solicits a model, if that's the word, maybe they come to his home or come to his room and they see the work that he's done and they're like, Jeepers, you aren't a real painter. And maybe they ask him, well, have you actually sold your art? Are you a professional? And then what can he say? And then they say, you know what? I don't think this is really about painting. You're not actually a real painter. Maybe you think you are, right? So anyway, he says, the poor little souls are afraid of being compromised and that people will laugh at their portraits. And it's not an exaggeration to say that, because even what's her name, Adeline Revue, the I think she was about 13 years old or so, the innkeeper's daughter in Auvergne, was not terribly happy with her portrait, and I don't blame her. um Marguerite Gachet was a better portrait, but not terribly great. It wasn't a terribly good execution. Um, I don't know if I would want, um, if I didn't know him, I don't know if I would want Van Gogh to paint my portrait. Obviously, it's easy to say now, oh, yeah, yeah, paint my portrait. No matter how crap it is, it's going to be worth millions. Yeah, but that's different. If you didn't know him and you came across him the way people came across me today, you don't know this person's story. You don't know the future of their story. How are you going to treat them at face value? Right. And so he says people will laugh at their portraits. He's afraid that they would feel compromised. He says, but it is almost enough to make you lose heart when you think that you could do something if people had more goodwill. So can you see how Van Gogh is actually also is sort of okay on his own? He can go out and he can struggle and he can suffer and he can paint and not sell anything. But then what disheartens him, and he uses the word maddening, what makes him feel, um what is it says he loses heart, is the way people's attitudes are to him. So he doesn't have a bad attitude. He's got a great work ethic. He's very resilient, but he finds it a little bit hurtful the way these folks around him seem to sort of either sneer at him or just don't know what he's doing. And so he says, I cannot resign myself to saying sour grapes. It does not console me for not having more models. So you can see he's in a little bit of a bad spot when he writes this letter. And he says, well, I've just got to have patience and keep looking around. Then he says, our sister will soon be coming now to spend time with you. I'm sure she'll enjoy herself. And so here he comes back to this. He says, it is a gloomy enough prospect to have to say to myself that perhaps the painting I'm doing will never be of any value whatsoever. So can you see how he is actually allowing the ordinary superficial sentiments of those around him to actually affect his self-esteem? He's allowing just the ordinary reality of his encounters with people, where they feel doubtful, they feel uncertain, they feel uncomfortable. He's actually feeling that sort of as a kind of assault on his own confidence. And he, to his credit, he says, you know what, it's quite a gloomy idea that I've actually got to say to myself, perhaps what I'm doing is never going to be of any value. And I think that is a very important thing for artists, authors, and anyone who's trying to build a life. I think you've got to ask yourself, perhaps quite frequently, um, is this going to be of any worth, right? Um, although not really in that, it's not really a true context, but me traveling in America, I've kind of also wondered in terms of my work as a true crime creator, true crime commentator, how much value has it has how much value will there really be in me having come to America? And personally and privately, I can say it's a huge amount of value. The amount of insight is incredible. If I don't even show a single photo, or if I none of that makes it into a single YouTube video, I've nevertheless gotten a much deeper, richer, stronger sense of these worlds and these characters and these places and these people that I've written about and these psychologies. So even if um, I never make another video again, I've gotten a very rich insight into everything. But I also can't help thinking, am I going to be able to convey that? Um, and even if I do convey it, are some people going to be offended? Like if you say California is awesome, do you then offend someone else in America? If you say I want to live in Utah, is there gonna be some kind of almost is there something political in saying a thing like that? I mean, it's simply a traveler moving to the country saying, I found that interesting, whatever, but the locals may have a different response. And maybe when you're outside the country, that means you don't have a foot in the race. Well, now you do, don't you? Something like that. But anyway, I'm just saying that it's the same thing where you say, I'm working quite hard. I'm putting in quite a lot of effort. I don't really want to compare my effort to his because his were really, you know, all encompassing. But you do ask yourself, is it going to have some value? And I think when you have that gloomy sense that it may not, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to cry? Are you going to complain? Are you going to accuse other people? Are you going to blame someone? Or are you going to step up? Are you going to raise your game? Are you going to, I don't know, try harder, do better? So he says, if it was worth what it costs to do, I could say I never bothered my head about money, but he's saying, you know, he's had to bother about money because of that it does cost money to create this art. Then he says, but as things are, on the contrary, it absorbs me. Um, but there it is, and anyhow, I must go on and try to do better. So the title for this video kind of is an amalgam of the previous paragraph, the beginning of it, and the end of the next one. Then he says, very often I think it would be wiser to go to Gogh instead of recommending the life here to him. I am so afraid that after all he will complain of having been upset. And isn't that fear going to be realized that Gogh is going to come there and he is going to be upset? Would it really be possible for us to live at home here? And could we make both ends meet, seeing that it is a new experiment? We can figure what it would cost in Brittany, whereas I haven't the slightest idea about here. I still find life pretty expensive, and you don't get anywhere complaining to the people here. Beds and some furniture would have to be brought here, and then there would be the cost of his journey and everything he owes. It seems to me to be risking more than we thought when Bernard and he spend so little in Brittany. Anyway, we must decide soon, and I, for my part, have no preference. It is simply a question of deciding where we have the best likelihood of living cheaply. I must write Gauguin today to ask him what he pays for his models, if he has any. So I think what's becoming clearer is, can you see how he's struggling? He has models turning him down. He has models that are putting him into a kind of existential crisis. And within that, he's sort of looking forward and hoping to see Gauguin. and that is what puts so much pressure on that whole experience. He becomes lonelier, and he starts to doubt himself a little bit more. He's working hard, he's doing what he needs to be doing, but he's nevertheless, he kind of needs a little bit of a pat on the back from society or from people to say, you know what, just keep doing what you're doing. I believe in what you're doing. Um, I'm not saying that he depends on that, but it would certainly be like a shot in the arm if he got that. Um, then he says, it seems to me to be risking more than we ought when Bernard and he spend so little in Brittany. Okay, anyway, so then he says, you see, when one is getting old, and bear in mind he's only 35, we must really rule out illusions and count the cost before embarking on things. And if when one is younger, one can believe that it's possible to get a living by unremitting work, it becomes more and more doubtful now. So can you see his attitude? And I kind of can identify it with it. Uh, his attitude is, if I just work shit hard, what kind of barrier can stand up against that? Yeah, I will just pour all of my youth, I'll just pour all of my energy into working shit hard, and eventually, what can stand up against that? But then he says, but when you get older, that idea of I'll just pour all of my life's energy into work, and eventually those dams, those obstacles have to fall over. Well, what if they don't? You know? Um, Thanks a lot, Bridget. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Uh, who are you saying looked exhausted? I must say, when I went down into that canyon, I was really just walking, and my heartbeat was pretty high. It was like over 140, and I was pretty out of breath, and I wonder whether I don't have a slight cold. Um, Not from just from um, too many late nights, I guess, and yeah, not from, like, just when you run down. You know what I mean? We feel a little ill, not because somebody sneezed on you, but just because you haven't rested enough. So that's what I actually did today. I spent most of the morning just doing admin and kind of being quiet. And so hopefully I've rested enough. I just don't know whether I'm going to be able to get up for uh, river rafting early tomorrow morning, because I slept late this morning, and then often you go to sleep late the next day. So anyway, we'll see. What do you guys say? Um, it's not that hot. I don't think it's altitude. I suppose it could be alt. I don't think it's altitude. It's not really higher than I'm used to, where I live. So um, it was hot yesterday, which is why I went out quite late today, and then today wasn't really that hot. Actually, I had to wear a long sleeve thing. Um, I often don't get enough sleep. It's difficult to say why. Sometimes it's, although I have to say I've been in a very good, I've been awake in the day while I've been in America, and asleep at night for the most part. Um, I think sometimes what happens is, um, you make a video at night, and you end up ruminating, you end up continuing to analyze that even when you've finished the work, and then that messes up the next day. So sometimes it's work that, that gnawing on the bone thing. You can't settle down. Sometimes yeah, sometimes it's like I've had to deal with certain problems in South Africa that are taking place in the daytime while it's nighttime here. So the person looking after my dog had her laptop stolen. By the way, the suspects in that have both been polygraphed and they passed. So there's some interesting drama for you guys. Um, yeah, so that's sort of um, yeah. I've also it seems like ancient history now, but there's a point where I couldn't get OTPs on my phone, and so I was trying to contact the banks and everything, and it was simply just set your phone to Wi-Fi calling, what Wi-Fi calling or something. So just a simple thing like that, trying to figure out a problem, or trying to solve a problem, well, because I've got some links back to my country, you can kind of only solve it in the middle of the night, and then that throws you out. Added to that, I've been doing some really long night drives, and that's why I ended up staying in Moab for like 5 days. Just like I'm not going to keep driving till 11 o'clock at night. So yeah. Um, anyway, I don't want to make this video about me. Murphy says, will it be cold when you get back home? Well, it'll be the middle of winter. It'll be the coldest month. Yeah. Yeah. I have needed to just, I think you guys know I've gone through America at a blistering pace, and I'm trying to slow that down. I mean, I'm trying to spend an extra day somewhere where I would normally not, or even 2 extra days somewhere. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. Yeah, it has been weird. Like it's been hot weather, cold weather. Um, Sleep has been, yeah, a little bit erratic. Definitely been a little bit erratic. Um, Look, I've driven in Portugal, and the best word of advice is you just never you can never like zone out. You can never just be like, oh, this is. You need to be constantly aware that you're not at home. Like you're not. This is a different system. So I'm quite comfortable driving now, but I've kind of got to stay alert in that sense. It doesn't get nearly as cold as it gets here. Um, but I certainly, when you see me in South Africa, I won't be in a t-shirt. That's for sure. What do I think of the USA so far? I'm like, I kind of have a sense of like when I met my friend Webb, the last time that I saw him, we were in high school, and I'm quite envious. I sort of feel like he's living in the first world. He doesn't have any of the struggles and the nonsense that you know. Um, anyway, his life is very different, and although I think South Africans generally can have an extremely high work ethic and quite a high threshold for things, um, I sort of think, how could my life have been different if I don't know, if I moved to America, say 10 years ago or 20 years ago? I sometimes see young people and I think, what if I'd studied here like Webb did? Um, what if I just come to America sooner? So I'm kind of aware of that. I'm also in a way dreading going back to South Africa because things seem to be going pretty badly in South Africa. The American government's not very happy with South Africa because I think South Africa sold shells to Russia. And so right now our currency is almost at its weakest level it's ever been against the American dollar. So yeah, and then plus someone just broke into my home while I was away. So yeah, none of it's terribly. It's hard to be. So you're seeing these beautiful things, but you're sort of aware of an undercurrent that's somewhat gloomy. Um, um, Something that I have noticed that surprised me is that I find Americans very friendly, very kind. You know, in South Africa, if you say "How are you," people will say "How are you?" Then you say "Fine, how are you?" or "How's it?" No, not that. You say "Thank you." People, okay, whatever. Here you say "Thank you," and people say "You're welcome," but then they seem to mean it. And but I think part of that is also if you in the most powerful country in the world and you know one of the greatest countries in the world, if not the greatest, what's there to be miserable about? Why wouldn't you be in a good mood? Why wouldn't you be nice to your fellow man? You're having having a pretty nice life, right? What's to complain about, kind of thing. But I have been pleasantly surprised at just how ordinary people have been, kind and sweet and friendly. I mean, when I went to the co-op today, um, the girl behind the counter, quite a pretty girl, said, "Oh wow, this food is making me hungry. I think I'm going to get some as well." And then we had a little conversation, and she was also just another person that didn't need to be friendly, and yet she was. So you know, I'll do. Oh, does Van Gogh look exhausted? Okay. Yeah, Canadians are very free. I actually find, um, because I lived in South Korea, I find sometimes, um, the Canadians and South Africans actually seem to have quite a good relationship because we are either overlooked or underestimated or something like that. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what it is. Um, anyway, I did have a really good conversation with some Canadians last night. It was quite a good chat. A lot of South Africans actually moved to Canada. Yeah, I must say it's a real bummer that that there's literally been a crime taking place in my home while I've been away. So part of what I've been trying to sort out is security, improving security from here and organizing it for there. So not ideal. But yeah, I'm trying to juggle everything. Be functional and still enjoy what I'm doing. So anyway, in terms of that, let's get back to Van Gogh letters. I think it's a test of anyone. When things aren't perfect, are you able to stay positive? By the way, this isn't beer, it's herbal tea. So I haven't turned to alcohol. Okay, let's continue. So he says, let's do this. Oh, Heidi says, you're sharing parts of the US that some of us Americans will never see ourselves. There's value in that. Uh, Bridget, I have actually been right round Australia, but I would love to go back to Australia as well. Murphy, I will answer more of your questions. It's just I don't really have time to, like. I've been to so many places, and I've got so much video to edit and put together. I'll probably end up doing it when I'm back in South Africa. Um, if I really wanted to turn myself inside out, it would be doing Team Peachtree videos every day. Th- that would then mean. So let me just share this thought before I continue. So when I was leaving Arches today, I was thinking the correct way for social media, someone whose life is in social media, someone whose job is in social media, someone who makes a living on like a social media platform, the correct way for them um, to be working is that you kind of need to be doing live updates. You kind of need to be somewhere and then you do a quick little live. This is me here and blah, 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 blah. In other words, it needs to be kind of curated and it needs to be regular and all that kind of thing. And of course, as soon as you do that, you aren't strictly speaking traveling anymore. You kind of, it kind of develops an artificial aspect to it. It's very good and it's very important for your audience that they can keep in touch and you keep the narrative going and they get regular content, but it slows down, it interrupts, it impedes the whole process of traveling and getting from A to B um, and all that. And so I couldn't help thinking of Gabby Petito and thinking she was doing it the completely the wrong way. I suppose you could say content was curated only for national parks. Maybe she would eventually have gotten sponsorships. But I think you first got to build that audience. You first got to get to 20,000 followers or 30,000 or 50,000. Then you start curating the way that I think she wanted to. Because it ends up being you've got very little content, although it's good, it's not very much of it. And so your audience can't really get used to it. So I was thinking, although I know that's what, and I'm talking about the true crime aspect, but also the Team Peachtree aspect. Although I know that's the right way of doing it, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make my trip just a social media um, exercise. That's not why I came to America. It was to kind of have a break and explore, but also to do a little bit of PR for my true crime channel. Um, and so I was prepared to sort of meet you guys halfway, where every now and then I'll do something. But of course, I'm in a position where I can kind of do that. Not everyone is. And so when I was thinking of Gabby Petito, you sort of realize he really needed to settle down and work. And I think Brian Laundrie didn't really want to allow that. And I'm going to Salt Lake City in about 9 days. When Gabby Petito went to Salt Lake City, Brian left and he went home. And that's when Gabby managed to make that one and only video that she made. But she needed to be making videos constantly. And that is a nightmare for not only a person traveling, but all the time you're working, making the video, editing the video, whatever, you're not really traveling. You're not really having fun. And it's even worse for the person that's with you. And so instead of going to a place and enjoying it, you're now thinking about how's the audience going to respond to it? How am I going to film this? And so that is, I think, something that may have not been very easy for a 23-year-old, to be expected to put herself aside completely. Suppose there's another way of doing it is if you've got someone in your support crew that while you're driving can film you, or while you're walking films that, and so you don't have to interrupt it, and it doesn't have to be the slick package thing. Then that can also work. Um, you know, Eventually you find a way that works both ways, where you are able to do what you're doing, and also it's not distracting you, not taking up more time. You just remember, if you've got to cover something, right? If you've got to cover something and you're going to spend more time covering it, then that's also going to add up to accommodation costs, right? Time is money. And so the longer you, like if every day I was in Moab, I put together a YouTube video. Probably you've got to stay twice as long in order to see everything that you're meant to see. and then it doesn't. It's a deal breaker because the cost of staying here, compared to what you've made out of your YouTube video, doesn't really add up. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's a really difficult thing. Do you then go home and you put it all together, or now it's not live anymore? And does anyone really care? So I was just very aware of how Gabby must have felt. Um, because if you think about it, the last images she put up was of the delicate arch, and then nothing in Salt Lake City. Well, there's a shot of her, I think, in the van with Brian, and they seem to just be sitting there. But you get the idea that between A and B, there's probably a lot of bickering, a lot of difficulty, and she probably felt the pressure of, I need to be putting up content, and every time I do, someone's getting upset. Everyone, whatever. The elevation at Moab, I think, is 1,500 meters. I saw the sign. Have a look. 4,000 feet above sea level. Some of it is 6,000 feet. Population 5,300. Actually seems like it's more than that. I haven't had any mushrooms. Yeah, so I did kind of have a strategy coming into America. I thought I was going to do certain things and then move it to members only. Then I just realized there were so many problems that didn't go away. Like one of them was, I don't really want to talk about problems, but getting my phone on the American network ended up being a constant problem. So you want to know why I was sort of sleep deprived in the last couple of days? It was, I spent 2 hours at a Verizon just trying to get my phone back onto an American network. 2 hours. And the previous night, I was going onto the Verizon website because I was like, I'm not going to be able to travel if I can't use, the mobile networks. So, in other words, so I can see where I was going. So I kind of had to sort it out or go back to California, and then maybe, I don't know. So that is something that can lead to a sleepless night. Yeah. So anyway, although if I'd have come back to America, say next year or 3 months from now, I think a lot of the birthing problems have been solved. Like, although I bought the right charges, they didn't work. So I bought the right thing. I had the right idea, but they didn't work. Then I bought another one, that didn't work either. Then I had to go and find something else. And so eventually I got something that I could charge my laptop with, but that took 2 or 3 days. Um, getting the phone sorted out, I thought it'd be like this, and that also took a couple of days. I also didn't expect to buy refill cards that didn't work. Verizon couldn't explain why it didn't work. So you have strange problems that are in some cases sort of not explicable. You don't get OTP messages on your phone, and no one can tell you why either. And then you eventually sort of figure it out. Obviously, I'm not going to have those problems if I come back. So I've gone through those birthing struggles, right? Um, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so let's get back to Van Gogh letters and not Nick complaints or Nick issues. Um, okay, so he says, I already told Gauguin in my last letter that if we painted like Bouguereau, we could hope to make money by it, but that the public will never change and it likes only easy, pretty things. I think he's talking about painting models, that both of them could like paint models. With a more austere talent, you cannot count on profit from your work. Most of the people intelligent enough to like and understand impressionist pictures are and will remain too poor to buy them. Will Gauguin or I work the less for that? No, but we shall be forced to submit deliberately to poverty and social isolation. So can you see how he's talking about the difficulty of an artist who's misunderstood? He's working hard. I mean, ultimately, all these efforts are going to pay off, just not for him and not in his life. But his struggle is keeping him poor. His struggle means he's socially isolated. He's lonely. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't really even have a girlfriend. Um, Society kind of rejects him because they don't really understand him. And yet he perseveres. And that is why Van Gogh is quite an incredible figure. That he says, you know what, I do care about what people think, but my work is so important, even though no one seems to appreciate it, but I'm going to keep working. And I think sometimes that kind of against all odds work ethic and belief, um, I think sometimes that is really inspiring. And it's kind of like what makes us different to machines, where a machine would say, this is illogical, this does not compute. A person might do that, and maybe sometimes something incredible happens, and maybe sometimes it doesn't. I would love to be able to beam myself back to August 1888 and sort of say to Van Gogh, dude, I can predict your future. This is what's going to happen to you. That and that and that. Are you going to do now? Do you still want to paint? And now let's say you could convince him that this was his future. So what should he do? Should he continue painting and he leaves this incredible legacy? Or is he going to say, you know what? I don't really care if my legacy is 10 to the power of whatever. I want to enjoy my life while I'm alive. Isn't that what everybody wants? I want some recognition while I'm alive. Um, and so maybe somebody said to him, Vincent, you're going to have a horrible life and a horrible death, but don't worry. After you're dead, your work's going to be awesome. You're going to be a rock star. You think he'd be like, yay, that's what I want? And maybe the answer is yes, because he was kind of a martyr like figure. He was kind of he saw himself as a pilgrim. And ultimately, isn't that what he ended up being? A pilgrim that lived a life that provided lessons and enchantment and more than that, kind of a magic to the rest of us. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know one way or the other. I don't know if he would. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. Um, we'll sort of never know. Okay, so let's continue. But I think that same question where you say we can go hypothetically out of the future into his past and tell him this is what's going to happen in your life. And you might say, I don't think he would do anything differently. What if someone could do that with you right now? What if someone could come out of your future and tell you this is what's going to happen? And I think if you said, I wouldn't do anything differently, I think that might give you a sense of relief and a sense of comfort that there is no right and wrong. There's simply doing whatever you're doing, and what works out is great, and what doesn't is just life. Anyway, so he goes on to say, what touches me most deeply in Zola's book is where he says, you think, you poor souls, that when an artist has established his talent and his reputation, he is safe. On the contrary, henceforth he is denied producing anything which is not perfect. His reputation itself forces him to take more pains over his work as the chance of selling grow fewer. At the least sign of weakness, the whole jealous pack will fall on him and destroy that very reputation and the faith that the changeable and treacherous public has temporarily had on him. So that's definitely an interesting thing where he says, even if you establish your talent and reputation, you're still not safe. Um, you are still at the mercy of the public that he seems to see here as quite fickle. And also, you can't show any sign of weakness. You can't make any mistakes. He says, even stronger than this is what Carlyle says. You know the glowworms in Brazil that shine so that in the evening ladies stick them into their hair with pins. Well, fame is a fine thing, but look you, to the artist, it is what the hairpin is to the insect. You want to succeed and shine, but do you know what it is you desire? So there he says, I have a horror of success. I'm afraid of the morning after the night before, of an impressionist success. Even these difficult days will later seem to us the good old times. So I think he's almost afraid of being institutionalized. He's afraid of um, becoming successful and then is forced to do what the market wants, I guess. I mean, he says, I have a horror of success. Well, Gorgan and I must look ahead. We must contrive to have a roof over our heads, beds, in short, the absolute necessities, to stand the siege of failure, which will last all our lives. And we must settle down in the cheapest place. Then we shall get the quiet which is necessary if we are to produce much, even if we sell little or nothing. But if our expenses exceed our income, we should be mistaken if we hope that all could be put right by selling our pictures. On the contrary, we should be obliged to get rid of them at any price and at the wrong moment. To conclude, we must live almost like monks or hermits, with work for our master passion and surrendering our ease. Nature and fine weather are the advantages of the South, but I think that Gauguin will never give up the fight in Paris. He has too much at heart and believes in a lasting success more than I do. That will do me no harm. On the contrary, perhaps I'm too pessimistic. Let's leave him this illusion then, but let's realize that what he will always need is his daily bread and shelter and paints. That is the crack in his armor, and it is because he is getting into debt now that he will be knocked out in advance. So bear in mind, I don't think it's true to say that Gauguin was totally devoted to Paris because he ultimately went to Tahiti. So I think Van Gogh was wrong in that assessment. Then he says, if we too come to his aid, we are in fact making his victory in Paris possible. If I had the same ambitions as he, we probably should not agree. But I neither care about success for myself nor about happiness. You see, so this is what he's saying in the summer, the late summer. We are now just under 2 years before Van Gogh's death, right? Supposedly from taking his own life. And he says, I don't really care about success for myself. I think he does, but he's sort of saying, I've given up caring about it. And then he says, I don't actually care about happiness either. And so, can you really then say that somebody got depressed or somebody lost their minds when less than 2 years before, those things that apparently made him such a troubled artist, so he couldn't sell his art, he doesn't care about that. He says it here. He's been saying it all along. He wasn't happy, he was struggling and whatever. He was very lonely. Yeah, but he didn't care about not being happy. He's accepted it. So how is the late summer of 1888 different to the summer of 1890 when he supposedly takes his life? It's not different. If anything, is more productive 2 years later. But this is the sort of thing that the art scholars don't highlight. These ordinary comments that he makes constantly about, I'm okay with my situation. He says, I do care about the permanence of this vigorous effort by the Impressionists. He's saying, I don't care about this, I don't care about that. I do care about the permanence of this effort this vigorous attempt by the Impressionists. I do care about this question of shelter and daily bread for them, and I think it's a crime that I should have it when two could live on the same money. He's saying, you know what I think is a crime is that my life is so easy, putting in this effort sort of on behalf of the Impressionists. Literally says, I think it's a crime that another artist isn't being invited to enjoy the adventure that I'm having, right? Yeah, I mean that is something that is gonna, it's a weird contradiction. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so he goes on, it's quite a long letter, but you're coming to the end. He says, if you're a painter, they think you're either a fool or a rich man. A cup of milk costs you a franc, a slice of bread too, and meanwhile your pictures are not selling. That is what makes it necessary to combine, as the old monks did, and the Moravian brothers of our Dutch heaths. So, what do you think they think of Van Gogh? Do you think that he says, if you're a painter, they think you're either a fool or a rich man? Which one do you think people think of when they think about him? And you know, which one is he? And if you think about it, his letters are so intelligent. His letters are so sensible. His letters are so consistent that they read like a narrative, and that's why we're at episode 55 already. Because even though these letters were written over 100 years ago, they are so eloquent. They are so it's not that he writes a letter that's two paragraphs and it's vacuous. He puts a lot of his heart and soul and his person, who he is, into these letters. He puts his identity on the line, and that's really worth something. Even like 130 years later, so 150 years later. Um, so it is about 130. What is it? 1890. 133 years later, we do get something out of his story that other people have struggled, and it was okay. They resigned themselves to it's not the end of the world. So I don't think he's a fool. You know, someone else might say, you know what, if you work your whole life and you don't succeed, maybe you were a fool. I don't see it that way. If you're saying it's okay that I don't sell anything, then it's okay. If you say, if I sell something that is a measure of me as a man, if that's your psychology and then you don't sell anything and you keep working, then you're a fool. Um, he's not a rich man either, but he's also not poor. The fact that his brother's able to pay for his, his brother is paying for his accommodation, meals, essentially his models as well, and his art supplies. How many people have had that sort of life where you paid to not really have a job? You paid to do what you want to do, right? So he's not a rich man, and he's certainly not spoiled, but he's certainly also somewhat privileged to be in this position that he's in, to be to be allowed to follow his heart because his brother is supporting him and his brother believes in him. That's a good point. That's part of his artwork as well. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So he says, I can already see that Gauguin is hoping for success. He cannot do without Paris. He does not realize the eternity of poverty. You understand that under the circumstances, it is all the same to me whether I stay or go. We must let him fight his battle. He is sure to win. He would feel that he was doing nothing if he were too far from Paris. But for our own part, let's keep our utter indifference to success or failure. Now, by the way, this is quite an important conversation he's having because at the end of the day, Gauguin's art will actually be worth more than Van Gogh's if you want to turn it into a competition. And get this, the most expensive art in the world, like right now, I think Gauguin is the fourth most expensive artist in the world, where we are right now, and Van Gogh is like fifth or sixth. So we are dealing with two of the absolute rock stars of certainly the old era. I do think we're moving into a different era where art is going to become more fluid and it's going to involve movement and textures and animation and all that kind of thing. Anyway, he goes on to say, I'd begun to sign canvases, but I soon stopped because it seemed too foolish. On one marine, there's an excessively red signature because I wanted a red note in the green. But you will see them soon. The end of the week will be a little difficult. He's talking about money. So I hope you get your letter a day earlier rather than a day late. With a handshake, ever yours, Vincent. It's 35 years of age at this point. He has a short telegram the next day from Vincent to Theo. It just says, Millier will deliver pictures Friday morning, 7 o'clock precisely at that address. And then I think this is not a very long letter, so we'll quickly do this letter from also the 15th of August, and then we'll call it a day. I'm going to try and do Van Gogh letters. I'm going to try and like not this is going to be about 2 hours, not quite as long as this, but I'm going to try and do um, 1 to 2 a week while I'm still in America. So I'm going to try and do. There's been like a bit of a hole where I didn't do anything, but um, since since the Valor case is over, I think I'll be able to do this. Helena, sleep well. Heidi says that spring is terrible with pollen. I was also thinking that it could be pollen, but we'll see. Okay, so let's just quickly deal with this last letter. So it's Vincent to Theo, 15th of August. My dear Theo, you will have got my wire telling you that Second Lieutenant Millier will arrive in Paris on Friday morning. He will arrive at the Gare de Lyon at 5:15 in the morning and go from there straight to the whatever. It would be simplest for both of you if you went to see him there at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, you can almost imagine that if you could go into a time machine, at 7 o'clock, you're at a certain address in Paris. This figure arrives, he's carrying some of Van Gogh's work all the way from Arles. Theo meets him there. Theo sort of steps off the sidewalk. They exchange like an actual package. They exchange words, and then the one goes the one way and the other. You can almost see it as a movie scene. He says, of course, you could also meet him at the Gare de Lyon itself. That's the station, train station. But to begin with, that is further off. And then you would have to get up very early. He has been very nice to me, particularly these last few days. He will return to Paris for a week, but he's spending the greater part of his leave in the north. I'm very glad to have these pictures sent off. And in this way, our sister will see my studies, and that makes a difference to me, for by this she will share in something that is essentially part of our life in France, crude and casual as it may be. I mean, she will see painting in the raw, but to do me a great favor, show 1 or 2 studies put on stretchers and framed in white. You can take some of the earlier ones out of their stretchers and frames. Don't let my stuff take up too much room, so don't get encumbered with the stretchers and frames for my sake. For the comrades, we will see well enough what it is like just as it stands, and you even more. Later on, when the 100 are done, you may remember he's talking about painting 100 pictures. Remember, my goal was to write 100 books, right? He says, we will choose 10 or 15 of them to be framed. I've kept the big portrait of the postman, and the head, which included, was done at a single sitting. So he's quite happy with this picture. And I actually saw a version of this painting in New York. It wasn't that one. And it wasn't this other one either. It's another version of it. Um, you guys may remember that Andre Agassi's father said something like, once you've hit 1 million tennis balls, you will then know how to hit a tennis ball. And that's literally what happened to him. As a little boy, he had to you know, hit a tennis ball, and then look at what happened. Agassi eventually did become a top tennis player, and he married tennis player I really fancied, Steffi Graf. And so doing something with incredible work ethic, doing something, just the same thing over and over and over and over again, you can become perfect at doing something ordinary. Like, what a thought, right? Okay, let's wrap up. But that's what I'm good at, doing a fellow roughly in one sitting. If I wanted to show off my boy, I'd always do it, drink with the first comer, paint him, and that not in watercolors but in oils, on the spot, in the manner of Dormier. And so this is Van Gogh starting to come into his own, because in fact, by the time Gauguin arrived in Arles, he was complaining. He was saying, dude, do you have to paint so quickly? Take your time, do it properly. And arguably, Gauguin was right. I mean, Gauguin did become a more valuable painter. His paintings became more valuable. Was that because he did put a little bit more thought into what he was doing? Of course, Van Gogh's the torridness, the impasto of his art is also what makes it. When you look very closely at the paint, it you feel something powerful in that as well. That's right. Well, you've got a good memory. That's correct. Okay, so he goes on to say that he's good at painting like that. He says, if I did 100 like that, there would be some good ones among them. And you see how he's thinking? He's thinking of that, like, if I just keep working hard, and if my work ethic means that I work fast and hard, and the volume is going to be enough to get me where I need to go. It says, and I'd be more of a Frenchman and more myself and more of a drinker. It does tempt me so, not drinking, but painting tramps. What I gain by it as an artist, should I lose that as a man? If I had the faith to do it, I'd be a notable madman. Now I'm an insignificant one. He says he calls himself an insignificant madman. But you see, I'm not sufficiently ambitious for that fame to set a match to the powder. I would rather wait for the next generation, which will do in portraiture what Claude Monet does in landscape, the rich, daring landscape a la Guy de Maupassant, who is an author. But then I know that I'm not their equal. But didn't he Flauberts and Balzacs make these Zolas and Maupassants? So here's to not us, but to the generation to come. You are a good enough judge of painting to see and understand what I may have of originality, and also to see the uselessness of presenting what I'm doing to the modern public. Can you see how he again is aware that what he's doing is kind of useless, but he's going to continue doing it anyway? It is because the others surpass me in clearness of touch. I do think that that is a very true statement. I've seen a lot of other artists with nowhere the reputation or the renown as Vincent van Gogh, who do have a much clearer sense of, some of their art is far more photo real. And I know he's not trying to be photo real, But sometimes I feel Van Gogh's work is too clumsily, like that self-portrait he did of himself walking. He's not putting enough effort into it. It's clumsy. Then he says that is more the fault of wind and circumstances compared to what I could do without the minstrel and without the fatal conditions of vanished youth and comparative poverty. For my part, I am in no way set on changing my condition, and I count myself only too happy to be able to go on as I do. So here, once again, you've got confirmation that it's saying things aren't perfect, things aren't ideal. I am struggling, I am misunderstood, but that's okay. I'm not going to try and change the situation I'm in. I'm okay. And I count myself only too happy just to be able to go on as I am. And so, how can one say, that he's depressed, that he can't handle his life when he's saying this less than 2 years before his death? I count myself only too happy to be able to go on as I do. In other words, if I don't sell anything, I'm happy to carry on doing what I'm doing. I'd like to, but I'm happy to carry on. I'm struggling financially, but I'm happy to be able to go on as I do. I'd like to continue painting. Thanks very much. Right. And every time we get to this, I am going to emphasize it because it's true. He is okay. He is having difficulty, but he's okay. He's a little bit of a martyr figure. He says, no answer from friend Russell, and Gauguin certainly deserved one. Then, final paragraph, he says, I've put in this package a drawing after a picture which I'm working on now, the boats with the man unloading sand. If some studies are not quite dry, so much the worse for them. They must be left to dry out, then washed with plenty of water and retouched if necessary. But they cannot come to much harm, and it was a good opportunity for sending them. A good handshake, and I do hope to hear from you by Friday or Saturday. Ever yours, Vincent. Can you see just how his art is coming along? I mean, that is quite a good execution. Look how nicely the water is done here. Think about those original sketches he did. Think about those original sketches he did in his letters. Look at the detail even in the sand here. And look at the detail in the background, you know, where he's even providing a little bit of the cityscape or the townscape of all. Even something going on there. Someone's being fished out of the water, I guess. So so that's it. So the next letter we'll do in Van Gogh letters 56 is the 18th of August. Quite a short one. I just want to see what the next painting is that he does. Not in that letter. Oh, it looks like we're going to see the sunflowers. That's awesome. So we're going to see some of the most famous paintings in the world, but also the paintings that he is famous for. And why is he painting these sunflowers suddenly? What's the point of it? Any of you guys have any idea? Can you see how there's yellow suddenly coming into it? Yellow. This is also yellow. This is very similar to that one, but it's different. Also quite yellow. That actually looks like Manhattan, doesn't it? So anyway, we will get to this in Van Gogh letters 56. Okay, right. So it is, what time is it here? Wow, it's actually 20 past 1 in the morning. I've got to be up at 20 past 7. So yeah, uh, if my alarm doesn't wake me, I'm sure the waters of the white water rafting are gonna going to wake me up. So yeah, we'll see. I wanted to do the full day, but that was fully booked. Then I wanted to do the afternoon so I could sleep a little bit later, but that was also fully booked. So I'm going to be doing the morning session, and we'll see how that goes. I'll try and share obviously photos of that. The afternoon session came with the barbecue, and the full day also with the barbecue. I've done whitewater rafting on the Zambezi, so this is probably going to feel quite tame. It may actually be good that it's a half day, so I don't get sunburnt. I have bought a pouch for my phone so that I can kind of have my phone around my neck and it's waterproof. So I'm all set to go for that. So I'll yeah, just check Instagram and I'll hopefully get take you guys with me on the water, um, via some Instagrams. I think there was a super chat here. Thanks a lot for that. By the way, I got sent some pictures of Timmy sleeping on a mat and apparently looking quite happy. So yeah, I think yellow is the color representative of him, and it's also color representative of life. I think in a way. Yeah, it's time for bed. So we're approaching 2 hours. I think I'm going to cap it off at 2 hours. Murphy says you will see wildlife and maybe an eagle or two. Speaking of which, after I'd photographed that rock on at the sort of balancing, there was a really big raven. Like sometimes these ravens look the size of not eagles, but you know, you sometimes mistake them for eagles. In South Africa, we've got black eagles with just little white spots on them. But there was a really big raven sort of at the parking lot. And I must say, everywhere I travel, so far, everywhere I've traveled in the world, Paris, France, Portugal, um, the Netherlands, not so much the Netherlands, but the Netherlands as well, America, not just here, all over. I see crows and ravens wherever I go. It's so weird because I wrote about ravens in my Madeleine McCann stories. It's so weird seeing crows and ravens everywhere. And today I actually got some video of this big raven, quite tame. It was literally 1 to 2 meters away from me, just trying to eat something that I guess someone had dropped a piece of bread or something. And I got unusually close to this particular raven. Um, Sometimes when we're walking on the path, so you park your car and then there's a beautiful path to where you need to go. Sometimes the ravens literally fly overhead, like they're looking for something that may have been dropped. And sometimes they pass you. In fact, at the Delicate Arch, the ravens are sort of circling, looking for leftover picnic food or whatever. So I just find it an interesting thing, seeing the ravens wherever I go. It's also something that reminds me of books that I've written. Ravens are reminders of death in a sense, but also opportunists who live in pretty spectacular environments. You know, I'm traveling to places I think are worth going to, and what do you find there? Ravens. Um, and I mean, they're such startling birds. They're big. They're not little sparrows. They're big. They there's something sinister about them, but there's also something really intelligent about them. Um, and they such masters of their world, and they sort of have made friends with us. They seem to have figured out how they can benefit from whatever we are doing. Same with rats. Rats are also a really good survival species. Um, okay. I've also had some really close encounters with squirrels all over America, not only squirrels, but little other critters running along the ground. And they're also quite tame, and it's a nice little touch. I've seen there were a lot of little rabbits around Webb's home in Thousand Oaks, and it's just a nice little. It's nice seeing nature coming out of the cracks, kind of thing. I'm kind of used to that in Africa, but you don't see that everywhere. One thing that I'm a little bit disappointed I haven't been able to capture are the little birds I'm seeing everywhere. Because the birds in America are different to our birds in Africa. And of course, you need my long lens to capture those birds. Um, I haven't paid as much attention to the little birds as I would have liked to. Maybe next time. Um, Mel says there are quite a few motherly types in the chat. Please get some sleep. Cool. Oh, I get what you're saying. Guys, that reminds me, happy Mother's Day for Sunday. Um, I probably won't be here. I'll have you guys be with your families on Sunday, but I might be here on Saturday. I might do another Van Gogh letters tomorrow. We'll see. Wow, that's awesome. Chelsea says I got my TTRS hoodie yesterday. Please put it on, take a selfie with it, and send it to me either on Instagram or email it, so we can put it up somewhere. I hope it fits you, and I hope it's nice and warm and comfy. I've actually got a moonflower hoodie as well, which I'm going to wear with pride when I'm back home. Helena, are you still with us? I've discovered the yellow birds in my palms are orioles. Okay. So I just want to thank you guys for being here. I mean, I was prepared to do a live with like no one or three people or whatever. And I think 22 people, given how late and sort of spontaneous this is, was really quite a bonus. So 23 people, I really appreciate you guys being here. We're normally about 30, so that's really not a bad showing. So thanks very much for being here. Chelsea said, I'm getting the Timmy one next time. Oh, I don't have Instagram. Well, you can email me. It's just my name at gmail.com. Helena says, okay, Orioles. Okay. Okay, so we at the 2 hour mark. So yeah, I'm gonna be asleep hopefully soon and up early for whitewater rafting. So I'll be sharing my adventures with you. So check out my Instagram for that. And then yeah, maybe I'll do another Van Gogh letters tomorrow. This time we'll see. Take care, guys. Enjoy this weekend and especially your Sundays. Lovely to see all of you. Mel, Bridget, Murphy, Chelsea, Alina. I thought you'd actually gone to bed. Zircon. Um, who else is here? Heidi. Thanks a lot for being here. Jody as well. Thanks, guys. Take care. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed the photos at the beginning of this. I'll try and do that with the next Van Gogh letters as well. Okay. Sleep well and see you guys next time. Keep weaving.